Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. It is the Thursday edition of the Michael Dukes Show, still locked in a deep freeze here. I mean, I moved away from Fairbanks so I could get away from all this cold weather, but man, it was like 16 below here at the house this morning. And, I'm ready. I'm already ready for spring. I don't know what the deal is, but I'm just not used to it. I'm a wuss now, man. I used to live in North Pole where it was like 50 below for weeks at a time, and you shrug it off, and I'm not anymore. Not anymore. Oh, man. Anyway, welcome to the program, and thanks for coming in. We got a jam-packed show for you today. We are, we're jumping in with both feet. We're going to get a little bit of a sneak peek at the legislative races today with our first fresh candidate of the year. Leslie Hajdukovich is going to be joining us here in just a minute as we talk about her run for Senate. She's running for Senate District P, which is up in the interior. It covers most of the downtown area and everything. It's a seat currently held by the perennial candidate, Scott Kawasaki. And we'll see what she has to say. This should be some interesting stuff. I kind of like this I kind of like this synergy of what happens sometimes when the legislature's in session and the incumbents can't really say anything, but the new candidates are out there free and clear to navigate. And I kind of like that because it gives them a chance to really get some momentum against, the power of the incumbency. So we'll see. We'll see what comes from that. We'll talk with Leslie about, a little bit of everything. Wood ticks, lunatics, politics, whatever we want to discuss. It's all there. Then in hour 2, it's the shower hour of power. That's right. State Senator Mike Shower will be joining us for his update on what's happening down in Juneau, being part of the unrecognized super minority. Every time I think about Shower and Rob Myers and Shelley Hughes, all I can think about is the kids who are sitting in the corner with the little pointy dunce caps, because I just feel like that's how the majority of the Senate is treating them. They're still working hard. They're still doing a lot of stuff. We had a conversation with Shelley Hughes on Monday that kind of covered some of the things that they're working on. But I just imagine that's just got to be an exercise in ultimate frustration. So look, I served on a borough assembly for 5 years, and it was people say, "What's it like?" I'm like, "Well, see that door? Just slam your hand in that door until you're unconscious, and then when you wake up, start again." That's what it's like, and that pretty much summed up my entire political. I mean, I did it for all the right reasons, but at the end, I was like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" They called me Dr. No for a reason. I was no. I would vote no more money. Anyway, so that's kind of what's coming up. Tomorrow is Firearms Friday. I am working on a guest, but boy, do we got a bunch of stories we can talk about tomorrow anyway. Lots of stuff happening in the firearms news, including this latest resolution from the Mat-Su Borough, which is encouraging borough residents to arm themselves and get ammunition and a firearm and get training, because we've got a significant dearth of troopers in the Mat-Su. Some areas of the Mat-Su requiring a wait of over 90 minutes, almost 2 hours for a trooper to show up at their house. And they're suggesting that you may be one responsible for yourself. You might want to be in the driver's seat on that. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. All right. All things being said, let's get to it, shall we? I see that Leslie Hajdukovich is in the green room. She's in there drinking my virtual coffee, or she's drinking her own real coffee and eating my virtual donuts. So let's see what it looks like and get things started for this morning, and get cracking, shall we? Let's welcome her to the program, Leslie Hajdukovich, our guest this morning. Good morning, Leslie. How are you?
Good morning from Fairbanks, Michael.
Oh man, you guys in Fairbanks, I love Fairbanks. I mean, I'm born and raised, spent my whole life there pretty much. Well, I like to tell people, I said, I spent 45 years there, and then the warden paroled me, so I was able to move off a little bit. But I love Fairbanks, but boy, you guys in the weather up there. I see.
I know.
What is it?
Michael,
35?
you said you had minus 16. So we've got double that. Minus 32 at my house. I'm looking at it right now. So
I used to not be a wuss. I mean, literally the year before I left North Pole and moved down to the Mat-Su, it was 57 below or colder at my house for more than 3 weeks solid. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. If that happened now, I mean, I just might go into a coma. I just don't even know at this point. So, all right, Leslie. Well, let's get started.
It's great to be here, Michael. It's great to see you. And when you were on the assembly, I think it matched up where I was on the school board. So we were both kind of being tortured a little bit.
Man, I tell you, that's a painful process, isn't it? Sometimes you're just like, you just want to grab people and go, do you understand what's happening? Anyway, it is what it is. You are much more of a masochist than I am. I've decided to continue on here. But let's get a little bit of background. The Hajdukovich family, I mean, our families have known each other for decades.
Yeah.
And so we've been around for a while. Although I'm a little jealous. I'm a third generation Alaskan. My grandmother was born there, right? Leslie's a fifth gen. I mean, you got some roots back there, sister. So
I know.
Give us a little bit of background here and tell us a little bit about yourself for folks who don't know who you are, who you are, where you came from. Give us a little bit of background here.
Well, and my maiden name is Ween. So I am the daughter of Richard and Sally Ween, who you probably know.
Oh, yeah.
But interestingly enough, Michael, my fifth generation roots come from Sally, and her maiden name is O'Neill, and her great grandfather, I believe that would be, came through Cordova for the gold rush. And so it's through her that I'm a fifth generation Alaskan. So long history. Her, the O'Neill family, which is was a big name in Anchorage. She was raised in Anchorage. And then, of course, my father, his parents were Noel and Ada Ween. And Noel was a pioneer bush pilot who came to Alaska in 1924. He did the first flight between Anchorage and Fairbanks. It'll be 100 years, the anniversary of the first flight, 100 years this summer.
Yeah.
And kind of incredible, isn't it? And the railroad had just been put in, and that summer it was a smoky summer. And so he took off from what is now the Park Strip in Anchorage, took off in an open cockpit biplane, and ran into smoke, I think somewhere around Healy, Nenana, but ended up following the railroad into Fairbanks. So anyways, long history. And the other thing I'd mention is my grandma Ada Ween, who Noel married. She's born and raised in Nome, and she ended up marrying Noel, the aviator, and ended up serving on the Constitutional Convention, one of 6 women who helped write our Constitution. And she was so incredibly proud to be in Alaska and to be so honored to do that and represent. And both Noel and Ada loved Alaska, and they flew back in 1958. I believe it was 58 that the vote for statehood was, and flew back to DC so they could be there for the vote.
Well, it's crazy stuff. It's it's not often that you find folks who've got such deep roots in Alaska, and it's good to see that you're still involved, still talking about stuff. You've got a little bit of background, as you said. You served on the school board, and you've been working, I know, in Senator Sullivan's office, as well as one of his coordinators there in the local area. And so you've got some history here and some insight into how the process works. So Leslie, this is my favorite question to ask. Not new politics, but folks running for office, right?
And I haven't been listening, Michael. So I'm like brand new. I'm just like, all right.
Okay. So here's the question: when exactly did you lose your mind and decide that you wanted to jump into this, this big thing of the state? Going from school board to state senate's a huge leap. And but what triggered you? What said? Was it one thing? Was it a combination of things, or was there a straw that broke the camel's back? What made you say, I think I'll run for state senate and do that? So give it to us.
Well, let me say first, it was not my idea. This fall, I'm duck hunting, I'm berry picking, I'm taking watercolor classes, I'm doing Pilates. So it was not in my plan. It honestly was not. And some good folks here in Fairbanks began calling me October, November, and they said, would you consider running? And my first answer was no. No. Why would I want to do that? But a couple more people called, and as I told my husband Bob, we'll be married 35 years, by the way, this summer. My husband Bob, I said, Bob, we need to do our due diligence on this, and part of that history, just having told you what I told you, about my my grandparents and the people who came before me. I mean, part of that kind of comes into play, and community service. It's just, I think sometimes it's in you, and it definitely is in me, because I love the state. I love my community. Yeah. So we began talking about it, and we're kind of both semi-retired. Our kids are grown. We've raised 3 boys. And they're grown. We don't have any grandkids yet. I don't know that my decision might be different if I had grandkids, but we don't have any grandkids. And then the other piece to this, so just the community service, the other piece that really got me out of my chair is thinking about 4 more years of the person that sits in the seat.
Yeah.
And that is, it's been a frustration, I think, for me and for others here in Fairbanks. And I think it's time to retire Senator Kawasaki. And he has been in the legislature for 17 years this year. That's a long time. That's a career politician. And, the founders, the people who wrote our Constitution, they called it a citizens legislature. And that is not what that is. And
Right.
So that's really what got me out of my seat. The other piece, and I'll tell you this, Michael, is that it's a presidential election year, and he hasn't had to run for the Senate seat in a presidential election year. So those were kind of the factors, and it certainly took me some time, a couple months actually, to really.
There is almost a felt obligation, isn't there? I mean, like you said, with the history of your family, my grandfather was, who's one of my personal heroes, was, he served on the Fairbanks Borough Assembly. He was the mayor of Fairbanks for a while. And so I felt like that was kind of one of the tipping points for me when I decided to run, was that, well, if he did it, I feel like I have to kind of follow his footsteps and do the best I can, kind of thing. So I definitely understand that. And it is interesting, when you look at the metrics of it being a presidential year and stuff, there's great opportunity here. So it's going to be good. We're going to continue here with Leslie Hajdukovich here in just a few moments. If you'd like to go out and find out a little bit more about her, there's not a lot on her webpage yet, but you can go out there and you can get a little bit of details. It's Leslie4AlaskaSenate.com. That's LESLIE for AlaskaSenate.com. Leslie Hajdukovich is our guest, and we're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Don't forget, you can also join us on Facebook if you'd like to join us in the chat room. We'll see if the folks in the chat room have any questions during the break. We'll ask some questions and get some stuff, and it'll be fun. It'll be great. We'll be back with more in just a moment with Leslie Hajdukovich, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Leslie Hajdukovich is our guest. Leslie, when you hear the bell, sounds like a ringside bell. When you hear that, that means we're 30 seconds from getting back to the radio. So we'll wrap up whatever we're talking about in the meanwhile. I see Brian says, pronounce her name again. It's Hajdukovich. That's how I was always taught to do it. So is that right?
That's perfect.
You're hitting it. I know even I have a hard time. I had to make sure that I looked at the thing when I spelled it, because you could never, figure it out. But
right.
It's always good. I mean, the Ween family, I mean, my aunt and uncle had a place right next to your folks. And so, I mean, we spent a lot of time, with the family. There's a lot, a lot of the older Alaska families, they're all kind of intertwined at some point,
right.
Interconnected at one point. So it's all good.
It's a small state, which is
it is, and I was really happy to see your name thrown in the ring on this when I first got the notification. And I'm glad. I think we could use some new blood in the legislature, right. And some changes. We've got some challenges. We've changed out. Leslie, we've got something on this program called the Charter of Changes. There are the 4 things that I think that need to change, which we'll get into here in just a little bit, and we'll ask you about it. But just so you are prepped for what they are, there are 4 changes that I believe that need to happen. We need to change the players, which means changing out the legislators, which we've done. 31% of the legislatures changed out in the last 5 or 6 years. So I think that's a good thing. I think we should change the venue. And what I mean by that is not moving the Capitol, but I think we should put the legislative sessions on the road system where 85-90% of Alaskans can actually access them in a face-to-face nature. I think we need to change the rules, which means we should eliminate the binding caucus. We should change and take a look at the conflict of interest rules and the Open Meetings Act. All three of those things should be looked at because the legislature, they've exempted themselves from most of the laws that, you had to apply, you had to, adhere to it. I had to adhere to it.
I know.
And then the fourth one is to change the funding, which means I think the governor should do the budget a little differently. I think it should be more of a zero-based budget or not predicated on, the pie in the sky, what we think the price of oil is going to be next year kind of thing. So those are the four changes. And we'll talk about that later on here on the program. But because I always like to ask that, we'll do that in the last segment. But yeah, so those are the things that we're going to do it. My dad says, "Welcome to the fray, Leslie." So dad's in the chat room right now.
There have been some moments like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But it's for a good cause. It's for our state. It's for our community. It's, good people need to run. And I'm not a divider. I working with different personalities and just even with my work in Sullivan's office, hearing from constituents and, I kind of focused on federal issues. So I've really happily in some ways turned a blind eye to the state issues. So, but that'll change.
That's exactly how we are exactly opposite on this show. I decided about 6-7 years ago that I could do so little for national issues that most average persons, I know they get all
vote. That's all you can do is vote.
All you can do, right? Everything else is just theater, right? And it's what's led to the divisiveness that I think we see in the country is everybody's so focused, and then they forget about what's happening in their own backyard, the stuff that affects them every day.
Right.
So that's why 5 or 6 years ago, I dedicated myself to focusing strictly on state and local issues for the most part. I do Firearms Friday, which is a national thing, but it's frustrating. And this is where people can make a difference. Yeah. Senator Rob Myers is in the chat. He just reminded me, I said in just the last few years, but since 2016, in the last 8 years, 64% of the legislature's been changed out. Yeah. We're still having some of the same problems because there's some old school 17 years, that's nothing. 22, 25 years now for Gary Stevens and some of these other guys. Folks who are just they're holding the reins of power and they're making the business as usual moves. And it is what it is. All right, Leslie, I'm sorry. I kind of monopolized some time there talking about the charter.
That's okay. You're a talk show host.
Yeah, I am. That's, the only job I could have. All right, we're going to get back into it. We're 4 seconds out. Leslie Hajdukovich is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
That's right. Not your daddy's talk radio, although my daddy is watching. He's in the chat room hanging out with us this morning. And we are joined this morning by Leslie Hajdukovich, who is running for Senate in District P, which is up in the Fairbanks area. And we're going to get into it with her right now. We just found out why she decided to run and everything else. Let's get into some of the issues. Leslie, there's lots of things happening right now. And the Senate especially, those of us who are conservatives are feeling a little bit left out, especially those in the Matsu. Mike Shower is my senator, and I feel like me and every one of the other constituents of people like Shower and Myers and Hughes have been disenfranchised by the majority because they're shutting the conservatives out and shoving them off to the side, and then now they're working with Democrats. In fact, there's actually a majority in the majority of the Senate. A majority of them are Democrats, and it's a little frustrating. And so we know that there's going to be some issues there and everything else. But let's talk first and foremost about what your big issues are as you go into. Let me wave my magic wand and say you get elected. What does it look like coming into next year for Leslie Hajdukovich? What kind of organization are we going to be looking at? What is going to be the priorities? Give me your thoughts.
One thing I've learned so far is that things change. Things are changing daily in Juneau. It's kind of amazing. I've been tuning into gavel to gavel and trying to, stay up to speed. So who knows what the case will be by next session. But I just want to mention, you mentioned Rob Myers, Senator Myers. I had a great chat with Rob a couple of weeks ago before he left, and great lunch with him. And so, I just appreciated the chance to learn his perspectives and, and understand more. And I'm literally drinking through a fire hose, just trying to kind of get up to speed on some of these issues. But I hear you. And I am a lifelong Republican. I consider myself a fiscal conservative, and, I would love to see a Republican caucus, and, and if changing this seat can help that, then, what a great thing. I'd rather duke it out with fellow Republicans in the caucus than trying to combine. And I know other people feel differently, but I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a pro resource development, responsible resource development. I do feel education needs to be funded, and I know there's a bill that's moving through from the House that's moving along there, and we'll see where that comes into play. Cheap energy is so key for us here in the interior. And I know it's becoming more of an issue for people in Anchorage and the Valley. It's the top issue for many of us, I think. And I know we talk about it a lot, but we got to keep striving for those solutions, in my opinion. And, natural gas, just we keep coming back to that. I'm not I'm pro coal. I don't know if that's okay to say, but the UC coal mine and the work they've done down there, clean burning coal, it gets a bad name nationwide, but that's not the case for us here.
We've got some of the cleanest coal in the world, actually, here, and yet they're going to shut down the power plants and everything else and make it harder for folks. It's a frustrating thing. Let's dissect this. Let's get a little bit more into the minutia a little bit here of this specifically. Now, you've served on a school board, so you're familiar with education issues.
Yeah,
and we know that from the Senate that their priorities are in order. Education funding. That's the first thing that's all they want to talk about is education funding. Then they want to talk about the return of defined benefits to the state for state employees. And then they want to talk about, like you said, the energy issues. They want to see if there's a way to incentivize or do some of these other things. So let's start with education. I'll be honest with you, Leslie. I mean, I'm smart enough to be able to understand some of the things that go on behind the scenes and how budgets are made. I've been through this process. I've watched what school boards and districts have done. And I get a little tired of this mantra that we keep seeing in the newspapers and the various media outlets about how education just hasn't gotten its funding. It's they haven't seen a raise in so many years. But if you look back at the numbers over the last 20 years, education has received almost a 30% increase in 20 years. We're spending billions of dollars. It is the second largest expenditure in the state on education, with over $20,000 per student being expended. And so while I understand that we have to keep up with things and that there's an increase at times, I got to ask the question, how much money do we have to? There's raising the BSA. The problem is, of course, the raising the BSA with no accountability as to the outcomes of the students. This is a problem. So where do you sit on this suggestion that we need a $1,100 raise, $1,200 increase to the BSA, and that's the only way it's going to happen, and otherwise we're all going to die? That's essentially what they're, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria kind of thing. We'll all be out on the streets if for some way we don't get this done. What are your thoughts on education, and is there a special amount? Should there be more accountability, and should they be delivering a good product instead of 48th, 49th, 50th percent, of all the states where we sit right now in education outcomes? What are your thoughts?
Right. Accountability, I think everybody wants accountability. And that's a key, I think, in education. It was on the school board. It was my time on the school board. We talked about raising student achievement, lowering the dropout rate, the achievement gap, all those things. I do think so. So to the larger funding issue, and I know the House has a $300 increase to the BSA in their current bill. And I'll just say this, I know there's been, one-time funding the last, I don't know how many years, but one-time funding. I know sitting on the school board that I'm just putting myself in their shoes. That can be great, even though I know, a pandemic happened. I know they got federal funding. That funding is now running out. But, the BSA is what you can count on. So I do think a smaller increase to the BSA is needed so that school districts can plan. I think that's a big piece of it. To that larger amount, I don't know about that. And I would have to really study the issue. I think where they're starting. And I think, I think the House members have said, okay, because that's a commitment. That's a long-term commitment. And where is the money coming from when you make that long-term commitment?
Right.
And then I want to talk about, I know the governor has talked about charter schools are having a little bit more oversight on charter schools, which I do understand. I understand, the motivation there. In Fairbanks, I think every district is different. And our charter schools have been pretty successful here. And I know when I was on the school board, we approved at least one new charter school. I think it was Watershed. And so I think that's doing pretty good. But I guess I understand his desire to have a little bit more oversight on that.
Right. I think it's more of a little bit more choice. The problem with having charter schools only be approved by a local school board is that essentially you have a competitive thing going on there where the school board feels like it's going to be competing with their public schools, and so they're disincentivized to start. And we've seen charter schools across the country, or historically they're doing fantastic. They're generally speaking doing much better than the brick and mortar public schools, and in many places there is a third party arbiter that can approve a charter school, whether it's a community council, whether it's a state government, and so I think they're just trying to bring us into that area. And we saw what happened with the Anchorage School District, where they basically dechartered a school there that was doing fantastic. And that seemed very punitive. And I think that's in part, this is a response to that, to say, you've got to have some outside control so people have another choice.
Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of what I've been hearing. And the other thing too, and it's something because of my time on the school board, is as far as public education, the students that I never want to forget are those students whose parents are either both working or maybe it's a single parent, and they go to that neighborhood school and they're not going to, the parents aren't going to be able to drive them to the charter school or do the commitment of a homeschooling program. So I don't ever want to forget those students. Sure. Because that's usually our lower socioeconomic group that is the group you want to keep bringing along, because it's, as a parent for somebody like me, I mean, I was involved in every aspect of my kids' schooling. And right now, I would really look at all options if I had kids going to school right now. Yeah.
I say, should there be an accountability aspect, though, of the monies being put? And this was actually voted on last session. Senator Shower, and they put in a thing that said, okay, well, we'll vote in favor of your increase for the BSA, but there has to be accountability measures that say you have to hit certain metrics. And that was summarily voted down by everybody. It's like, we want the money, but we don't want any accountability. And the fact is that most of the monies that are coming through the BSA are not making it into the classroom. Less than 50%. In some cases, it's down as low as 40% is all that's making it into the classroom. And that's a huge, especially when it's supposed to be for base student allocation. And the implication from every news story and every talking point and every press release says, oh, we need this for the kids. But it looks like most of it is going to overhead and staff, administrators, those kind of things. And that's really kind of thrown. It used to be that there was a mandate that 70% of the BSA amount had to be spent in the classroom. And that got removed in the late 90s. And I don't know why, other than the school, education, industry wanted to have more use of that money for other things. And of course, since then, we've seen kind of the teacher rate go down like this, and the overhead and administrative staff go up like this, to where now we've got 2 to 3 administrators for every teacher. It's gotten super top heavy. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Should there be an accountability issue, and should more of that money be mandated to go directly into the classroom?
Yeah. And that's, I didn't know that change was made. Maybe that is something I should have known, but I'll tell you this, Michael, is that when I was on the school board and I remember going to Juneau and advocating for school funding or just, talking about schools. And I see, board members were down there this week, at least from Fairbanks. And I remember going into legislators' offices and them saying, listen, we we need accountability. And I remember, at the time thinking, okay, so they want to see this, and we would offer that. Now, thinking about going into that position, that's what I'm going to be asking, because it has to be. We can't just throw money, and hope for the best. And I think there's frustration, and I think when I look at the education system, I'm just going to focus on, local, like you and I were talking earlier. It's like local. You can talk about nationwide, but local. And it's a constant challenge to continue to raise those, the graduation rates. And I see the Governor's Reads Act, that was instituted in the last couple of years. I was reading up on that and just making sure that our early elementary kids are getting what they need. So having those things in place, I think, is a start, and making sure that we can, meet those accountability,
Right.
levels.
Right. Well, and the big question that nobody seems to be asking is, who pays for all this? Where does the money come from? Right. We're already, according to DOR, projected revenues and where we're going. We're already going into deficit spending starting next year. Next year. We're already in deficits. We've drained the CBR. We've drained the SBR. We've taken almost all of the PFD. And once all of the PFD is gone, there are no more pots of money to draw from.
Right.
So who pays in the long run? And, what does that look like? You got about 2 minutes here.
Right. And, I'm not a big tax person. I'm a fiscal conservative, and so all of those things are going to be in my mind. They certainly are in my mind as I'm beginning to learn about this process. And where does that money come from? And if you want to do this, you may not be able to do this. And so they're big, complex issues. And, I was thinking the other day that that some of these topics that are really difficult, if they were easy, we would have already solved them. They're complex, they're difficult, they're multifaceted. We have a large state. Look at the regions of our state, and understanding how to educate kids back, keeping with education, in Fairbanks, in Anchorage, in Southeast, in the rural, in Bethel, all different different circumstances, and making sure we can have a statewide effort that raises our achievement, make sure our kids are educated and can go on and do the jobs that we need them to do, and hope that they'll want to stay. That's kind of what I'm about long term.
Leslie Hajdukovich is our guest. She's running for the state Senate in District P, which is Fairbanks, downtown Fort Wainwright, the interior. It's a current seat held by Scott Kawasaki. We're going to continue with her and talk in just a moment about the Charter of Changes and what her thoughts are. And can she commit to those ideas? Does she fall in line? And we'll find out. That's all up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Leslie Hajdukovich continues in just a moment.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
That's one thing you're going to have to get ready for, Leslie, is that if you do appear on the show from time to time, somebody will be listening and they will take you to task. They will take it. Here's what you said.
Michael, I told a couple people, I said, I'm going on the Michael Duke Show. And, I honestly have not listened to you since you left Fairbanks, just because my routine or whatever.
No problem.
Anyways, I was like, what? Wait, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. Is that a bad thing? So.
Well, I will say some of the business as usual crowd in the Republican Party, because I've been a little hard on the Republicans. I'm a libertarian, right? So I've never been a Republican, but I've been a little hard on the Republican Party because quite honestly, they're part of the problem at this point. The party itself and some of the members who have the R next to their name, yet they continue to do policies that, to me, it's not R's and D's in the Senate or in the legislature. To me, it's the people who are more government spending versus less government spending. More we're focused on the government economy and to hell with the private economy, and those who are like, the private economy needs to thrive so that we can help support the government economy. I mean, that's, I think that's part of the problem, is that I've taken some of these Republicans to task and they don't like that. But if you have an R next to your name and you're ostensibly supposed to support the party platform, yet you're continuing to expend huge amounts of money, vote yourself a 67% pay raise, which again, talk about tone deaf. Did nobody read the room when they looked at it,
And I, when you talk about it, everybody's like, yeah, we did.
And
when you're in the Senate, you can say you didn't.
Right. Well, it's frustrating, and that's probably why a lot of people. Look, I don't pull any punches. If somebody does something well, I congratulate them. If they do something stupid, I call them out on it, and that. Like I said, I'm a libertarian. Everyone hates me. Okay, that's just how it is. And so,
Michael, I was remembering when I think I was on the school board around the same time, but I remember you had a, you would pack your weapon. Do you still do that? You would have it in a little satchel.
Oh, every day. I've carried a firearm every day of my life since I was 17 or 18 years old. So, I mean, it's just who I am, and I know people would freak out over that. It's, for the most part,
it was very Alaskan.
Yeah, it is what it is. People are going to be upset about some of the dumbest things sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to come into the charter of changes here. I want to talk about, again, you've got more experience in the education, and that's kind of why I think we focused more on education on this issue. But I do want to touch for a minute just on this defined benefits thing, because you were there at the time. I think you were on the school board when PERS and TERS was coming apart. We had a $13 billion liability, and the school board and the districts and the communities, they were having to pay astronomical amounts of money to try and compensate for that and everything else. What are your thoughts quickly here? We got about 2.5 minutes. What are your thoughts on this idea of returning to defined benefits as a savior of our inability to hire or maintain employees? What are your thoughts on it?
Unless I'm missing something, and I did try to watch Senate Finance yesterday and watched what went down, because I have great concern about it. I was on the school board during that time, and the giant unfunded liability between you and me, our good friend Martin Peel from Ketchikan, who was on the ARM board at the time, he's friends with my parents, and he plopped down his notes on it, and he said, Leslie, we've got a freight train coming towards us. I mean, it was
we still do. We still have $6 billion unfunded from leftover from that. I mean, you want to add to it? That seems insane.
And to me, the risk of it, it's like, okay. And I heard Kathy Giesel, just between you and me, I heard her saying, well, as my husband says, it's like a Ponzi scheme. He said, the more people, okay. She said, well, we'll get more employees. And so then the actuarial tables, start working out. And man, it's if I were there, unless I'm missing something, I would not be in favor of this. I don't have all the information. I haven't been presented. I haven't listened in, but unless I'm missing something, it's not the direction we should go. And how much time do we have?
Less than a minute. Go ahead.
Okay. We've got workforce issues across the nation.
Right. This is not simply an Alaskan problem.
It's not just in Alaska, and it's not just the state government, it's private sector. And if you're looking, as I told my friend who's in the Senate right now, I said, you're trying to solve a short-term problem with this really long-term, literally weigh us down for the length of those people's lives.
Right. It's like shooting yourself in the foot to prevent the cut on your hand from hurting.
I'm going to refill my coffee.
Okay, good. We got 25 seconds. We're good to go. Leslie Hajdukovich is our guest. We're going to continue with her here in just a second. The Michael Duke Show. Please like and share ring the bell, subscribe, follow, do all the stuff that you need to do, and we'll come back to that here, and we'll continue. Only 17 people have liked the show this morning. I don't know what the wrong is. There's 60 people in here. What's up with you guys? Come on, you're falling down. Let's go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
I mean, I'm not the smartest critter in the shed. I did graduate from Lathrop High School, but, it is what it is. Leslie Hajdukovich is our guest. She is running for the Senate in District P. Early on in the break, I kind of gave in the first break, I gave Leslie kind of a sneak peek of the Charter of Changes, and gave her some of the details, and I want to kind of break that down for her now, because I still believe that is one of the best ways to try and get Alaska back on track. Like I said, we've changed out a significant number of legislators over the last 8, 9, 10 years, but there's still some old guard in there trying to do things the way that we've always done it, and unfortunately, we just don't have the money to do the things that we've always done. They continue to seem to want to push in that direction, both Republicans and Democrats, and that's a problem. So I've suggested that we need to change the players. Now, obviously, you're running for the legislature, so I would assume that you would support changing out the players in the legislature at that point.
Yeah, that issue number one, yes. My answer is yes.
Yeah,
I think 17 years is long enough for Scott Kawasaki. I think he's done his community service for sure, and it's time for a change. I know Fairbanks is interested in a change.
Well, I mean, that leads to a deeper question of almost like, shouldn't it just be like 2 terms and done? If you're 4-year terms, or maybe 3 2-year terms, something. I mean, shouldn't there be a point where it's like it is a citizen legislature? And you need to be in and out. We've got legislators who've been in there right now for 20 plus years, and at some point you got to be like, Jack, you got to go. We need some fresh blood in here. Shouldn't there be a new slew of ideas that goes into the legislature?
It's a really good point, Michael. It's a really good point. People who, when I've talked about running, they said, well, you've got to make it 2 terms, because I do think it takes time for people to come up to speed. And, I don't know that I can't even think that far ahead at this point.
Right.
But,
right.
I think it takes a while. I know just what I'm trying to learn. It does take a while to learn the process, but it's just like anything. You can get set in a certain way. And I know I served 2 terms on the school board, and people wanted me to serve longer, and I said, it's time for somebody else to take the wheel.
Would you be supportive of some kind of term limit in the future?
I'd have to really think about that in the legislature. I haven't thought about that topic. So I guess undecided right now, but I'd want to learn more. I think, like I said, it takes a while to get up to speed. I can already see that. And and then the House, right. If you've got a 2-term or 2-year term, probably those first 2 years, you're learning the ropes. So, yeah.
No, I think it would definitely have to be a different term limit for each body. But I think I think if you hit the 10-year mark, I think at that point you're like, okay, it's time to go.
Right. Go do something, head out, enjoy the land.
Go produce something. So let's move on to number 2, which is a change of the venue. And I want to be real clear here. I'm not talking about moving the Capitol. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm just saying that we should hold the legislative session on the road system. 85% of Alaskans can have access to the road system, and within just a handful of hours, they could be at Juneau. Now, you've gone down to Juneau as a school board member and everything else, but how many times have you ever flown to Juneau on your own dime just to go, pitch a bill or support a bill? You just don't do that, because it's a $3,000 trip to go down there and several days worth of time, et cetera, et cetera. My suggestion is, if you want to get there where you can sit in the room, look at your because you've sat on a board, and when a room full of people shows up and they're looking you in the eye, it's a lot different than if they're sending you emails or they're on the phone, right?
That's right.
I would just say that Alaskans should have the opportunity to actually look their legislators in the eye and go, I agree with you or I disagree with you. And so why not hold it's happened before. Why not just set the session to be held on the, and I don't care where it's at. Hold it in Fairbanks, hold it in Delta, hold it in Wasilla, hold it in Anchorage. I don't care, just so that I can climb in my car and within a handful of hours and a tank full of gas, I can be there. And if I need to round trip it back home the same day, I can. That's what I'm talking about. What do
you know, your compact, you know, it's not too radical, Michael. I'm, you know, it's not that radical, at least so far. I mean, it really, you know, like you said on the school board, that's what's been so interesting. And I've known this, that you can take an at ease in the legislature and then they talk and then it comes back and then a decision's made. None of that in our local school board, you know, on the assembly, everything was done in public, everything, you know, painfully. And usually these are the people, like the people who are on our assembly or school board or city council, you know, they're just, you know, they're business people or they're, you know, they're just living their lives. They're not, you know, professional politicians, and they're your neighbors.
Well,
and
you're getting a little bit ahead of us because that's number 3. But number 2, so would you support the idea of putting the legislative session on the road system?
You know, in general, I support the concept of more accessibility to constituents, because you're right that having a room full of people or having people being able, or not just people in Juneau, other people around the state to be able to go and be there in the in committee meetings, or, you know, so it's something I haven't given a lot of thought to, but the general concept I think is good. It's more of an Open Meetings Act type of, I'm getting ahead of it. Open Meetings Act.
I mean, it does tie into it a little bit, because it gives you a chance to, you know, be at the session, be there in the meetings, go to their office, talk to them directly. I think that's an important thing. And I think it's something we're missing in Alaska that almost every other state in the union has. You can drive to your capital and participate.
Right. And I did love when I went to Juneau, and it was usually for the school board. I did like that once you were there, I mean, everybody's pretty accessible. The problem is it costs a lot of money to go there.
That's the problem right there.
Yeah.
Number 3 is changing the rules. And we talked about, I mean, the binding caucus rule, which I find to be, well, in many states, it's unconstitutional. First of all, it's illegal to hold a binding caucus. Here in this state, we've just made it be the status quo. Now, for a couple of years now, that's kind of gone the way. But I think it needs to be just basically outlawed, where, you know, you show up and they say, okay, well, if you guarantee us your vote on the budget, we'll give you committee seats and everything else, but you've got to guarantee us that you'll vote with the majority on the budget. That's coercion. That's extortion. You know, you haven't written a single word about the budget yet, and then I have to commit that I will vote for it no matter what. That seems to be wrong.
Yeah. And, you know, honestly, I haven't done a lot of research on this topic. I mean, because I'm brand new. Up until, you know, early December, I was, you know, doing my thing.
Let me ask you, if you had been on the school board and they said, well, we're going to form a majority on the school board that tries to get things done, but if you want to participate, you've got to guarantee that you're going to vote with us on the budget.
Right. Yeah.
What would you have said?
Hard to imagine. I mean, we were free to, and what's interesting in my time on the school board is that, you know, it was nonpartisan, which I did kind of like, because we were all focused on, our focus was on student achievement. And we kept that at the forefront. And so, you know, what would it be in the legislature? You know, everybody has a view and everybody's elected by their constituents from their area. So anyways,
and quickly, I got a minute here. The next 2 are the Open Meetings Act and the Conflict of Interest rules. Now, every other elected or appointed or even small community road service in the state has got to abide by these rules. Yet the legislature exempted themselves. Shouldn't they have to play by the same rules that every other elected body does? Quickly here.
On the Open Meetings Act, you said, and then what was the
Conflict of Interest? But open meetings is more important.
Yeah, Open Meetings Act. Boy, it's been that way for a long time, I think, what they have so far. But boy, tuning in more now, interesting. And most of the decisions are made, you know, behind a curtain.
Right. The deliberation should be in public, just like every other body. That's
as painful as that is. And you and I know.
It's intentionally meant to be. That's what the framers and founders intended, is that it would be a difficult process. They didn't want it to be rubber stamped. So I'm assuming you would support exploring that idea.
I would explore the idea. You know,
You're not going to commit.
I can't. I'm too new.
All right. We got less than a minute here, Leslie. Give us your final elevator pitch. What people need to know. How do they find you?
Oh man, I just appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And I just want to mention I have a Facebook page. If anybody, I gotta remember my Leslie Hajdukovich for State Senate. You can find me there. And I just appreciate the opportunity. And I am energized. And we had a kickoff 2 nights ago here in Fairbanks, a kickoff event, very well attended. It was minus 30, 31 or 32. And Fairbanks came out. And there's an enthusiasm.
All right. Leslie Hajdukovich. We're out of time. Hour 2 dead ahead. Sorry, Leslie. We were up against the break there. I wanted to do it. But again, Leslie for AlaskaSenate.com. I think that's the easier one to find than people trying to figure out how to spell Hajdukovich. But it's Leslie for AlaskaSenate.com. I posted a link up into the chat room. I would challenge you, Leslie, to think about the charter of changes that I've given you, because like you said, these are things that you may not have ever considered before. Harold makes a valid point in the chat room. He says, if the AFN can have its conference in Fairbanks and in Anchorage, why not the legislature?
Yeah.
I mean, really, why not? We've done it before. And again, to think that just average citizens could then go to the legislature and stand in their representative's office and talk to them.
Yeah.
Why is that not even being considered? I mean, instead of the fishbowl that is Juneau. I asked Tammy Wilson one time, right after she got out of the House, and I asked her, in your 12 years of being in the legislature, how many times did the average Joe Blow, Mary and Sue, Alaska, how many times did they just show up to talk about just an average citizen show up? She said, I can count it on one hand in 12 years. And I said, okay, so how many times do people who are with an NGO, a school board, how many times have they showed up? She goes, multiple times a day.
Yeah.
You want to know what part of the problem is? Part of the problem is that average Alaskans do not have daily access to their legislature. And I think that's a huge problem.
It really is. And it's, and the other thing, even on that education committee meeting that lasted Saturday, as I told my husband, I said, I think those are all Juneau folks because they're able to go. I mean,
all Juneau folks or people who are working for lobbyists or who are for, PTAs or whatever. I mean, that's part of the problem is that they are it's an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And they're not hearing or seeing it. You and I both know that sitting in a room with people standing across the dais from you saying things makes a big difference than if it's just like email testimony or anything else. It's much more impactful.
Right. And theoretically, Michael, anybody who's running for the legislature, I mean, like me, I do have some experience, so it's not like on the school board. I mean, no, I mean, I'm a mom, I'm a PTA mom, and I'm having to make decisions about hiring a superintendent in public. Those were the hardest ones because you're basically trying to hire somebody in front of the entire town.
Right. And it's difficult, but again, that was intended, right? It wasn't
right. And
the framers
in the legislature, you theoretically people are more experienced. I feel more experienced. It's like honestly, I'm brand new, or I might be brand new. If I went down and those were the rules, I'd go, okay, those are the rules.
Yeah, no, that's right. And of course, the binding caucus rule, which most people don't think about because most people don't it's only really in the last 2 or 3 years come to prominence since we started talking about it a lot. But that rule has been in place for a long time. A brand new legislator shows up and says, hey, kid, if you want to play with the big boys, you've got to promise us your vote. Yeah. Now, you'll have your bite at the apple. You'll get your chance, blah, blah. But you've got to promise you your vote. And if you don't vote the way we tell you, you're out.
Yeah.
You go to a closet in the basement.
Yeah.
And that offends me.
Yeah.
Everybody,
and that
it's have the right to vote their conscience on that.
Yeah. Those are good points, Michael. They're good points.
All right, final question, then I'm going to give you a minute to summate. Will you come on the program if you do get elected? Will you come on the program every month or something and give us updates and talk with us about stuff?
I'll try. I could try.
I'll try. It's a 1 hour commitment in the early morning before anything else gets started during the
I know, which is I tuned in one time. I was going to meet, actually it was Will Stapp. I was going to meet him for breakfast, and I was like, oh, I'm going to just try. I don't know what you come on up here. But
Right.
anyways, I caught you in Senator Shower, but I only caught like 3 minutes or something.
Right.
But anyways, I was like, oh, it's Michael Dukes. He's, I can catch him here. So anyways, I'm gonna do my best, and we'll see. But I appreciate the time, Michael. I really do. Great to see you. I hope you're well. I hope your family's good.
Yep,
And
everybody's doing good. There's life after Fairbanks. I will tell you that.
yeah, okay.
So I love it. My folks are still up there. Everybody else is still up there, but it is what it is. All right. Well, we'll hope that if you do get elected, that you will come on the program and you won't forget us and won't avoid us, because it's what we need. We need more transparency in the state government. We don't have it. That's the problem. That's what I'm trying to do. All right, Leslie Hajdukovich, Leslie for AlaskaSenate.com. That's where you find her. I've already posted links to the chat room, and we've got Mike Shower coming up here in a second, so you can listen there if you want and get more education on what's going on in the Senate. All right, Leslie, thank you so much for coming on board and joining us. We appreciate it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Leslie Hajdukovich, our guest here on the program this morning. I mean, yeah, she's taking a sip from a fire hose. That's pretty much the visual that you need to look at if she's trying to figure this out right now. And she's going to have to get down into some of these issues and come up with some good stances on this, because this is a tough year. This next 10-year period, I think, is going to be the make or break for Alaska in figuring out where we're going, because nobody else, there's no long-term vision in those kind of things. Nobody else seems to really be putting that stuff forward, and I think that's a problem. All right. Let me get Shower here. Do I need to send him I guess maybe I should send him the link, because let's do that. Why not? We got about a minute and a half here before we join in. Make sure you like and share, you like and subscribe, ring the bell, do all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to send another text to ask him what's going on. I can't talk and type at the same time. It's one of my failings. Or use a video link. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Okay. All right. We're jumping in here in just a moment. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Fee-thinking radio. We'll be back with more. Hour 2 is dead ahead. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. It is hour 2 of the Michael Dukes Show, and we are continuing discussions here of a state business nature. We're going to be joined in just a moment by State Senator Mike Shower, who's going to be calling us, and we're gonna get all squared away here in just a hot second. We just finished up with Leslie Hajdukovich, who's running for state Senate, rather, District P up in the interior, and it's interesting. I mean, you could see that Leslie is brand new to the idea, and we're in early days. I mean, this is January, right? We've got another 10 months or so for her to get up to speed. But I think she's definitely going to have to get a little more squared away on some of the issues and have some ideas and some talking points about what she thinks needs to change and what needs to happen. And I'd like a little more commitment. We talked about the charter of changes, and we got a definite one was a yes, the changing the players, obviously, because she's running for office, but the other two were kind of more iffy. And she needs to think about it more. But let's face it, most people have probably never considered the ideas that I throw forward in the Charter of Changes. It's just not something that's on their radar. So maybe they need some time to think about it. So we'll come back and interview Leslie again here in the future and see where she's at. See what she's see if she's come to a conclusion on some of this stuff. And I know it's difficult, especially in the very beginning, to get to take a solid position on something when you may not know all the details. But she's taking a sip from a fire hose. She's going to have to lock onto that thing and figure it out. But I'm excited to see that somebody is working on that, and we'll see what that brings to the table here in just a minute. All right, I'm waiting on Shower here, and we'll just see what's coming on here. He's supposed to be here in just a moment, so we'll see how that. I should actually turn the ringer on so we can hear everything and know what's happening there. All right. Some of the other stories that are going on around the state. Let's get into that, shall we? And see what else is happening. David Boyle, who maybe we'll try and get on next week to talk about this. He's got an interesting article in Must Read Alaska talking about school closures. Now, a couple of things that we haven't mentioned or haven't noticed really talked about is the fact that the reporting numbers for the number of students in the districts is late. We haven't seen the actual numbers yet. When we normally we see them before year's end, and here we are in January, so we're already into the second semester of the school year, and we haven't seen the reporting numbers for attendance, and that concerns me a little bit. We were talking a little bit the other day about this chronic absenteeism that we're seeing across the country, with some communities having a chronic absentee rate of over 40%. Which means, and for those of you who know, the definition of chronic absenteeism is any student who misses more than 10 days of school in a given given year. I think it's given school year. So over 2 semesters. And it is skyrocketed, obviously, since COVID. It is skyrocketed. And not only that, but enrollment overall has declined. Which is troubling to me. Now, we're not seeing the numbers that are coming out that we would normally try and make decisions on. The legislature is getting in session, and usually that would play into, in some way, the decision-making process as to how many students each district's going to have, and is it trending up or is it trending down? It's been trending down for a long time. But the problem is that we are not getting the numbers, and that makes all that decision-making process very difficult to move forward. We expect it to be lower, but maybe it's so low that nobody wants to bring it forward. Maybe that's the hold. I don't know what the holdup is, but we'll find out. This goes back to David Boyle's story. David Boyle has got a story in Must Read that says Colorado shows how to close schools. And I know nobody wants to hear about schools closing, right? Nobody wants to do it. Everybody's all emotionally wound up and invested in this. We've got our local school. But there comes a point to where if you have got an excess of capacity and you've got all these students and you're also facing what are they calling it, a $96 million deficit, you're going to have to look at some cost-cutting measures. David starts to talk about it and says, the school district's problem in a nutshell is that they have a total capacity at the elementary schools of nearly 27,000. It's 26,400 and change. right? But the actual numbers of students last year, now remember, we don't have this year's numbers yet, or 2023's numbers yet, the start of that school year. But last year's number was 19,484, which is just a hair under 7,000 empty spaces. Now, if the average school houses, 400 students, Houston, we have a problem, right? I mean, most of these elementary schools are 400 or 500 kids. That's it. Some of them are even smaller. Remember, some of the Fairbanks schools are between 300 and 400 students. So, I mean, when you get down to that, that's a serious issue. You now have 7,000, and that's last year's numbers. What is it this year? Is it 7,500? Is it 8,000? Is it 10,000? We don't know. That's part of the problem. He says there's an even further downward trend in the future because, again, the predictions are all saying, again, a continuing decline in enrollment. And they're saying that by 2027, there will only be about, according to their calculations, 16,800 students. That's 10,000 students fewer than what the district has capacity for. That's a huge problem, folks, because now you are paying for open buildings and maintenance and overhead and staff and everything else for 10,000 student seats, even at 500 per, let's just say it's a 500 student per building. That's 20 school buildings that are being kept open where they continue to spread the students out further and further to keep the buildings open to justify it. But that's 20 buildings. So how should they deal with it? And he says, well, if you want to, you want to go to where something like, where do you go? You go where somebody has already done it. And he points to Colorado. He says the Jefferson County, Colorado public schools have closed 16 elementary schools and are closing 4 more this next year. The superintendent took her job seriously, made the decision to move forward. The Jeffco School District is larger than the Anchorage School District. Jeffco has 66,500 students and a building capacity of 88,000. Jeffco has 166 schools, while Anchorage has 84 schools. So they've got about double what we have. But again, they were facing the same kind of issues with declining enrollment and everything else. And they faced, this superintendent, Tracy Dorland, faced many of the same issues that we hear about down in the Anchorage area, right? This weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth about, the school is the center of our community. And, they have an emotional connection. They don't want to lose that connection to this is the same school that I went to, or all my kids have gone to this school, or whatever it is. And just like in Anchorage, some of the Jeffco parents threatened to remove their kids from school if you do this and everything else, but they had to move forward. It has to happen. You cannot have 10,000 excess school seats, excess places, and say this is all just going to work out fine. When your overall capacity is 26,000 students and you have only 16,000 in this, butts in the seats, something's got to give. Well, people will lose their job. Well, yes. What happens when other areas and other companies, when they have to, when they lose, they don't have the revenues, when they don't have they're not taking in, they're not making the money, they're not doing, what happens? You have to pull your horns in. You have to consolidate. You have to, if you've got branch locations, you have to talk about cutting the branch locations, and you bring some people into the main location from those branches, but not all of them. You don't have the room. It's a redundancy. You don't need, if you had to close 20 schools, you don't need 20 extra janitors at the schools that already have janitors. I mean, it's just people will lose their job. Well, yes, it's unfortunate, but that's called life. That's called basic economics. You can't just hold people on the employee rolls because you might hurt their feelings. The employment costs make up 75 to 90% of almost every budget from every entity in the world, be they private or public or whatever. You just can't keep holding those people on the rolls because somebody might lose their job. Yes, that's a problem. Absolutely. It is problematic on the individual level. But if you want the whole to survive, you've got to do that. Which again makes me ask the question of how much of an increase to the BSA is actually going to affect people in the long run if we have this continuing declining enrollment. If they are saying that by 2027, for example, I'm using the numbers from the school, if they're saying that their total capacity for elementary students in Anchorage is 26,432, but that by 2027, which is only 3 short years away, that capacity will just be 10,000 less than that. We have got some questions. We've got some, and even if you do increase the per student funding to the $1,100 or whatever that they want, if you have 10,000 fewer students than what you need, is this just a continual crisis? Is this just going to continue to go on over and over and over again? This is a problem. I think we'll see if we can get David on to talk about this later on the program. Maybe Monday. I don't know. Maybe today if Shower doesn't show up. We'll see. He was supposed to be here already. I know. He's we'll see what happens. Anyway, we're up against the break, so we might as well take it. And then we'll see where we go from here on the other side. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more right after this. Don't go anywhere.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Talk amongst yourselves for a minute here while I figure out what the hell Shower is. Okay, welcome back to the program, the Michael Duke Show. Sorry about that. We're working on our stuff over here. David, I don't know if you want to talk about this right now. I can't get a hold of Shower. I don't know what's going on. But David, if you would like to discuss this and you have time, I can either send you a video link or you can call me. One of the two. You tell me what you'd prefer in the chat room, or we can wait till next week if you want to do that. So feel free to to tell me in the chat room right now what's going on here. Why are kids not attending school? Says David. Again, a big question. I'm concerned about this. All right, what else we got here? I'm scrolling upwards here. Not Bailey's. Kirkland Irish Cream. What? Bailey's or Carolyn? Oh, I see. It was a question about coffee and Bailey's, and I don't know. It's Irish cream. It can't be bad. I mean, it's very bad. Jeannie says the interview with Leslie was unconvincing. She says, very unconvincing. I'm a no vote. Well, I mean, again, she's green as grass as far as some of this stuff goes right now. Green as grass. And I can understand her hesitancy to try and commit to some of this stuff. But you're right. She's going to have to make some decisions. She's going to have to make some decisions on and get educated on some of these things and figure out, where she stands on it. Jeannie goes on to say, makes no sense to replace Kawasaki with a twin. Brian, on the other hand, says, I like that lady. She sounds like a mainlining Republican, but at least it's a fresh voice. To which I would agree. I would consider Leslie to be kind of one of the median, middle of the road, Republicans that we've seen. Some of which have been problematic. Others have not. So we'll see. We'll see where she sits. But again, she's going to have to come up to speed on the issues that are facing us. Some of these issues are critical, and she needs to be part of it. All right. David says he'll call in. What number? David, I'll email you the number, David. Not plastering my number out there for the whole world to see because God almighty. In fact, I probably have your number at some point here. Let me see if I can find your, okay. Okay. I will go ahead and send it to your email address. Here's my phone number. Or you can reply with yours and we'll see what it is. I just sent you my phone number, David. Feel free to call in and we'll get squared away. Okay. I think I have your number, but I can't be sure at this moment. All right. We're all ready to go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. There you go. Let's do it. All right. Welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Continuing now. I don't know what happened to Shower. He may have gotten called to fly. I don't know at this point. But we're continuing on. And since David Boyle, the author of that article for Must Read, was in the chat room, I asked him if he wanted to call in and discuss it further on the program because, I'm an opportunist, right? He's right there. Why not ask him? So he's called in this morning, and we'll see if we can get some information from him and talk about it. And he joins us right now. Good morning, David. You with us?
Yeah, good morning, Michael. I'm a very poor substitute for one of the best senators in the state, Mike Shower, but I'll try.
At least you show up. No, just kidding. I'm giving Shower a hard time. Giving Shower a hard time on that. All right, David. Well, let's talk about this for a minute because, again, there's a confluence of things that I really should just do maybe one whole 2-hour show about this with some various guests and some quick hits. But I mean, there's kind of a perfect storm happening across the country. We're talking about the explosion of absenteeism across the country, this absentee rate. We're talking about the continual decline in enrollment across the country. Again, this is not just an Alaska problem. And we're talking about people's basically distrust in the educational system overall, the explosion of charter schools, homeschooling, learning pods, kind of these, asymmetrical teaching systems that are coming up and popping up all over the place, teacher share programs, et cetera. And it's kind of creating this perfect storm. And so here we have this question of schools wanting more money. In this case, an increase to the BSA. But if, as projected, the enrollment is going to continue to decline, I don't know how much more that's actually going to help them. But let's talk about this. The school district in Anchorage already has a lot of empty spaces, and we're talking about now specifically in the elementary area of K through 12. And that's a huge problem. And you've been looking into this, discussing it. You've talked with us about the budgetary shortfalls and how much money do they really have and what's their fund balance. And there's a lot of things, but talk us into this part of the equation here.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much for the opportunity. Well, first of all, I just want to mention there is no budget hole in the Anchorage School District. And you can go to Must Read and find one, Alaska, and find one of my articles on that. Because they have a $71 million, they have actually $118 million unfunded balance that they can grab a hold of to fill their $98 million budget hole. As you said in your summary statement there, this is not just happening in Alaska where kids are leaving the public school system. The number of students is decreasing dramatically, and there are several reasons for this. We can actually thank COVID. One of the best things to come out of COVID and lockdowns, et cetera, was the fact that parents finally got engaged and learned what their kids were learning at school by looking over their shoulders as their students were doing remote learning, looking over their shoulders at the computers. And this is one of the reasons why we have a shrinking public education student population. The other reason is if you look forward downstream, as the Anchorage School District has done, they project that there are going to be many fewer students of K-12 education age because we're just not reproducing children, and that has a lot to do with the different value system of the millennials and I guess you'd say the Gen Zers, and that's going to be a long-term trend. So as you stated before, today, since we have like 7,000 student excess capacity in the Anchorage School District. But if they're looking for actually downstream, by 2027, we're going to have 10,000 fewer students than we have today in the elementary school system for Anchorage only. Now, this is going to be happening even probably more so at some of the smaller schools in the bush and even in Fairbanks and the Mats, maybe not the Matsu because they've been holding steady with their student numbers because of what's happening in Anchorage, people are moving to the valley and taking their kids with them. So, in order to compensate for the lower number of students and thus the less funding from the state of Alaska legislature, they want to increase, because the volume's down, they want to increase the per student cost to the state. And they're actually asking for $1,400 more per student. And that equates to, I put on Facebook, that equates to 278,000 permanent fund dividends in last year's PFD amount.
Oof.
It's, and the education industry, they're threatening a lot of legislators down there, with the election coming up with putting an opponent out there and funding them. So those people, many of them, I won't say most, but many of them are only concerned with getting reelected, which is I guess a travesty. But so the other thing happening in Anchorage, which is probably happening in the other school districts as well in the state, is the fact that we have a cartel. And President Eisenhower warned us of the military-industrial complex in his farewell speech. Well, what we have going on, and we have for decades now in Anchorage and the rest of Alaska, is we have an education, architect, construction cartel going on. And they don't want to see any buildings closed. They only want to build new buildings, such as the Inlet View School, at a cost of $50 million more, which will be on the bond ballot this April in Anchorage. In the foundation formula, there's one of the factors in this foundation formula that funds education K-12 from the state. There's a factor in there called building size. And it was very interesting because even the Alaska or Anchorage board and the staff was briefed that when you start closing schools, you actually lose money because you don't get that money for that particular school.
Right.
And then if you have, let's say you have 2 elementary schools with 200 kids in them, you have 2 of those. Well, you get more money for those 2 schools than you do if you had one school with 400 elementary kids in them, the same number of students. So they're very reluctant to close any schools and consolidate them as well, because they're going to lose money from the state of Alaska funding because of that building size factor in the formula. And I don't know, it's ludicrous and irrational to see what the funding formula does. And there's
and one of the sneaky things that I was surprised of about 20 years ago was that they have the difference between design capacity and current capacity, where they'll take a school and the school is pitched and sold to the public and to the community as a school designed for, let me just pick a number, 500 students. But then as they go through and within 10 years, the design capacity changes because, well, they play with the numbers or they do whatever. And now a kid needs, instead of 3 foot per student, 3 square feet per student, now you need 3.6 feet per student. All of a sudden the capacity goes from 500 to 400. And then, 5 years later, it's at 350. And now they're like, well, this school is just over capacity, so we need a new one. And it is. I mean, this goes right back to that trade magazine that I looked at many years ago that just shocked me down to my socks, which was an Associated General Contractors trade magazine. And the headline read on the front page of the magazine, "Selling schools to your local communities." That it was all, the whole thing was about, this is how we go out and sell schools to local communities so we can have a job to build a new building. And not that I'm against people making money and doing, I mean, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when you have a whole process and a whole cadre of people who are trying to game the system to tell people exactly why and sell people on this kind of concept, it becomes an industry unto itself.
You're exactly right. That's great. You found that trade magazine to read that. That's very interesting. The comments there. You're right. The state has a formula per student. Let's say square foot per student in an elementary school, and it's 114 square feet per student. But in the Anchorage School District, these guys are pretty bright at what they do. They've decided that they don't like that state capacity formula of 114 square feet per student. They've come up with something they call program capacity. And you can find this in their capital improvement plan. The program capacity is about, depending on the school, is about 20%, 10 to 20% more space required for a student than the state mandates or requires in their capacity for a student. For example, let's take Abbott Loop. If you look at the percent filled in Abbott Loop School, the state says it's 49% filled. The school district says it's 65% filled. Therefore, it's well over half. So that's one of the schools you wouldn't look at for closing, let's say.
Right.
And I have another article I wrote, I don't know how long ago, that's on Must Read, showing those statistics as well. And the other interesting thing is Inlet View. A few years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago, Inlet View had 170 students in it. This is the school that they have on the bond issue to not remodel, but rebuild a brand new school. 170 students was what their student population was. Today, the student population is 235, almost a 40% increase. And you wonder how they did that. Well, they're manipulating so they can get a brand new school built there. Now it's way over their program capacity, like 130%. And what they've done is they've started a new program in Inlet View back in 2018 called a great program actually for students, really smart students, the International Baccalaureate Program. And so now what they're doing is they're busing students or parents are taking their students over to Inlet View to the IB program, International Baccalaureate Program, because it is an outstanding program. But that program can be housed in any school in the district. There's nothing unique about Inlet View to have the IB program in it. And if you look at the neighboring schools around closely that are adjacent, let's say, to the Inlet View school, that they say is 135% over capacity or at capacity, those schools are, I can't remember what it is, but those schools are probably about, well, let me look here, hold on. Like North Star, 72% capacity. Turnigan School, these are elementary schools, right next to Inlet View, 68%. Lake Hood, 56%. Northwood, 69%. They're all basically less than 70% filled. And so they want to build a new school because Inlet View is over capacity. Well, what you do is you redo the school boundaries.
Right.
And you take the IB program and you move it maybe to one of these other schools.
Right, to one of the schools that's got a lower capacity.
Yeah.
I want to get back to this article, though, specifically, because, again, I've always advocated that if you want to do something, find somebody who's done it and see what they did right and copy that. To me, that makes the most, because there's no sense in reinventing the wheel, right? Experience is the best teacher, especially when it's somebody else's experience. So we should always be looking at areas that have done something that we want to do and figure out, can we adapt that to use for ourselves? And that seems to make sense. But I want to get back into this. David, can you hold the line for me for just a minute here?
I sure can.
Okay. All right. Hold the line. David Boyle is our surprise guest here this morning. We're talking about education and the closure of schools. And this is something that many districts are going to have to face in the state because there's an overall decline in enrollment statewide. So the question is, as I've often said, as goes Anchorage, so goes the rest of the state. This is just going to be the canary in the coal mine kind of thing. We're going to have to talk about this. David Boyle's our guest, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
What is that?
Common Sense.
Yeah.
Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show.
Okay, David Boyle is our guest. David, I appreciate you coming on such short notice. I again, I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm glad that you are. I'm glad that you're on here and with us on this. To me, that was one of the most astonishing things, that this capacity issue that we just talked about, because that was brought to my attention right before I got on the borough assembly, that they were talking about that schools were designed and sold to communities at capacity X. This school will house this many students. And then slowly over the course of time, we saw school districts, change things and everything else. And all of a sudden, a school that was originally sold and designed with 400 students, all of a sudden could only hold 325. And I'm like, what changed? I mean, nothing got smaller. I mean, nothing, nothing happened. The kids didn't get bigger. So what exactly is going on? And again, it was just one of those things where it was a manipulation of the system to basically say, well, now we need more schools because we've got more kids that won't fit in the thing. I mean, it's really kind of an astonishing end run around what they're selling to the communities.
It really is, Michael, and I wish the legislators would pay attention to that factor and what the school districts are doing. Just like you said, the kids aren't getting any larger. Well, some of them aren't getting any larger, but they're manipulating. They're manipulating the facts, and I guess we could call it misinformation. And they need to be called out on it, but by specific legislators, either in a committee or behind closed doors, because they could say the capacity has increased even more so. I mean, or not more so, but decreased because they've increased the requirements again up to maybe 300 square foot per kid. I mean, where do they stop? I guess they may not stop.
Right.
But anyway, the superintendent of Jeffco County Schools.
Well, don't
Jefferson.
get. I want to get into the article. Let's not get too far into the article until we return to the air, because I do want to talk about that. But let's, for just a second, since we got 3 or 4 minutes here, let's talk about the numbers, because I keep mentioning it now. Normally, the attendance numbers come out November, right? After they do the count in September, October. It's usually November that the numbers come out.
Right. They do the student count the first 3 weeks of October, and it's due to the state from the districts by November 10th. I've sent 2 emails to DEED asking them where are the numbers and why haven't they been produced? And because Anchorage knows what their numbers are. They've lost this year 1,279 students, and that's been in the school board meetings. But I haven't gotten an answer from DEED yet. I guess I'll have to do an open records request.
So nobody from DEED is responding, because normally it's mandated by statute that they have to have it to the state by the 10th of November, and then is it regulation or statute?
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably regulation.
Okay.
But why have a requirement? Nobody meets it.
Right. So in 2022, they had 19,484 students, and you're saying they're already saying that their numbers are down another 1,700 students on top of that?
1,279.
I'm sorry, 1,279. Okay.
This school year. Right?
Yeah.
And they project they're going to lose more next year. I don't remember the number. It's a smaller number.
So now they have 8,200 empty positions in. I mean, it's frustrating to see that. Again, how can we make valid decisions, or how can we make informed decisions and informed opinions if we don't have the proper numbers to be able to decide that? I mean,
you can't make informed decisions, and that's the idea. That's the objective. They don't want to make informed decisions. They don't want to be confronted with data and factual information. They work on the basis of innuendo and opinions. And I was I testified last Saturday on Senate Bill 140, and I was online for 4.5 hours, and I was about one of only 4 to testify basically against the Senate Bill 140. But I don't have a problem really with them increasing the BSA $300. Because there are so many other items in there that are good. And, just between you and me, I have been informed that probably the governor would veto that $300 increase anyway.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that thing plays out in the long run, just because of everything. And I know what the legislature was trying to do, what the House was trying to do. They want accountability, and instead of just giving a blanket $300 or a blanket $200 million, they wanted to say, okay, we'll give you the $200 million increase, but it's got to go into specific areas because you have no accountability, and that's part of the problem here that we're seeing.
Right. The governor in that bill, he wants bonuses to go to classroom teachers.
Yeah. All right.
And,
well, David, hold the line. We're 20 seconds out here. We're going to jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show continues. David Boyle is our guest, surprise guest. He's been kind enough to come on board. We appreciate that. And we will continue in just a moment. Please like and share. We got about half the people who are listening, and I know half of you are not Juneau staffers. So, if you like it, great. If you don't like it, if you hate it, just put the angry button up there. I don't care. Let's just engage. Let's just get more people involved.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Oh, we repeated it. Sorry about that. Anyway, welcome back to the program. David Boyle is our guest, education advocate. We're talking with him about his latest article in Must Read Alaska, which I love because I think, again, one of my axioms that I've tried to live my life by is if I want to do something, if I want to go out and do something or make something happen, my first plan is to always find somebody who's already done it and figure out how they did it, and then see if I can adapt it to what I'm doing. Because that just seems to make sense. I mean, experience is the best teacher, especially when it's somebody else's experience. David writes about a school district in Colorado, the Jefferson County School District, Jeffco, and how they have successfully closed 16 elementary schools at this point, and they're closing 4 more this year. So 20 schools total will be closed, and they've had to do it because of declining enrollment. Now, here in Alaska, we've talked about this. Some school districts have closed. Fairbanks has closed a few schools. I mean, there's some things that have happened, but this is the one thing that just terrifies, apparently, the education industrial complex, where they do not want to close a school because, gasp, people might lose their jobs, kind of thing. But when you have 7,000 empty students, empty student seats in capacity in the Anchorage area, for example, in elementary schools, that's a huge, I mean, that's, even if it was a 700 capacity school, that's 10 schools worth of empty seats. Why are we not redrawing the lines? And what did Jefferson County find out? Did the world end, David, when they closed these schools? Were they able to close up their fiscal gaps? Did it work out well? Give us the rundown here.
Well, Jefferson County did it right. First of all, they got everybody in the district on the same team with the same mission, and that was to close schools that were excess to the student capacity requirements. And you got to commend the superintendent there for that. She stuck to her guns. She laid out a plan. She involved the community, involved the parents, and then when they listened to the parents. And I, by the way, listened to the parents. Was it last year when the school district, Anchorage School District, was going to close? I believe it was 10 schools were on the list, and they went to every school and held a community meeting, town hall with them. And to almost every one of them, every one of the parents in these various schools in Anchorage, for example, complained that the school was the center of the neighborhood, and their parents had gone to school there, and they had gone to school there, and their children go to school there, and it was an emotional attachment to the school, and I understand that, but none of those parents mentioned the fact that the schools were really doing a great job in teaching their kids, except at Birchwood. I'll take that back, except at Birchwood ABC school. But all the other schools, the parents were only concerned about their emotional attachment and their children having to meet new teachers and new staff and maybe get on a bus instead of walking to school. So there was nothing about how well those schools were teaching our kids how to read. And that was, to me, it was just unbelievable. But to me, it kind of showed a level of, unfortunately, shallowness from a lot of those parents. And by the way, I'm a military family, and my kids have been in 5 different school districts. So we know what it's like to remove a child from a school every 3 years or so, move to a different school district, a different state. Kids are flexible. They get over this. They're a lot more flexible than we parents are. Yeah. And actually, it's kind of good. I found out the kids become more confident in themselves. They adapt to change much easier than sitting, in the same home, let's say, or state or whatever during their life. But anyway, the superintendent at Jeffco put a great team together, and she told them what the mission was, and they all stuck together on that mission. She actually, like you said, closed 16 elementary schools, and 4 more are going to close this year. She put out a very detailed plan on how it was going to work, involved parents, involved the students, and involved the entire staff and the community as well. And when they had these, well, she listened to the parents, but she didn't lose sight of her job, and that was to close schools because they couldn't afford it anymore, and they were also, quote, in a budget hole. Just like this is across the nation. All these school districts are complaining. We got a huge budget deficit, and that's because they use COVID money to pay recurring cost, one-time money for paying salary and benefits of staff members. But so when they pushed back against her, like the article I read was most of the parents pushed back against her. They didn't like what she was doing, but she stuck to it and got it done. And she actually, if the staff members of one school that was being closed, they took those staff members, for example, the teachers, admin staff, et cetera, and they went to the receiving school that the kids will be going to, various schools, and they actually helped the children, move into those schools, and it was pretty seamless, apparently. But their transportation worked out fine. We have Anchorage School District in the last year when they're trying to close their 10 schools. Oh, transportation. Actually, our transportation costs are not going to change, which I don't understand. Anchorage was interesting. They closed the school building and it costs money.
Yeah, it costs them money to close the school. Well, and again, is that creative accounting? Is that the same kind of thing where we hide the numbers so that you can't make the decision? Well, now we'll make it look like it costs more to close the building than it does to leave it open. I mean, a lot of things that to normal people that just doesn't make sense.
Right. And I'm actually going to send a link to the Jeffco schools and how they did it. I'm going to send it to the Anchorage School District, the superintendent, Bryant, and the school board and say, here you go, guys. Here's a plan on and how to do it. And actually, you may even want to go down personally and talk to that superintendent down at Jeffco schools. And the Jeffco schools, Jefferson County Schools, it's the second largest school district in the state of Colorado. It's a huge land-wise. It goes, Wheat Ridge is north of Denver, and then it swoops all the way down through Golden, which is Coors Brewery, I guess, and then goes down not the front range, but the hillside there, and then all the way down around where actually Columbine High School is, which is a part of that school district. But it can be done, and just like you said, we don't want to invent any more wheels. Let's just find out how they did it. And a lot of school districts are going to have to do this across the nation, not just in Alaska.
Well, because like we were saying, I mean, the decline in enrollment is not simply an Alaskan problem. This is a problem across the country. And whether it has to do with reproductive rates or, other issues, people pulling their kids out of school or seeing less of a benefit in public schools after COVID, et cetera, this is a continuing problem. In fact, you talked about the downward trend, saying that the projections are by 2027, we'll have 10,000 empty seats essentially at the elementary level in the Anchorage area. And that's going to be, again, probably played out across the state in various communities. I mean, this is an ongoing problem. Am I wrong?
No, you're correct. They're going to, in Anchorage elementary students, they're only going to have 16,826 students is their projection in 2027, which is not very far off. It's a tremendous decrease, from 2022. It was 19,000 plus then. So they're going to have to, the problem with bureaucracies is they never want to downsize. They always want to grow.
Right.
Any level of government. Have you ever seen any place that downsized ever?
Yeah, I mean, not in government. I mean, we see it in the private sector all the time because they have to answer to the revenues and everything else, but not in the public sector, not in public bureaucracies. They want to avoid that kind of pain at all costs.
Right. We see retail companies across the nation now. A lot of it because of online purchasing that are shutting down. CVS, Walgreens, Walmart. They're all closing their stores across the nation because the demand is down, and they look at their bottom line for each one of those facilities and retail outlets, and they say this one's losing money. We're going to have to close it, and that's unfortunate. But a lot of times they move those employees to a different retail outlet in that area. But you can't close a school and keep your staff, because the staff, for example, in Anchorage, is 86% of their operating budget is salaries and benefits. In the other thing playing here is in Anchorage, they just increased the health insurance payments from the school district to the Public Education Health Trust, which is the NEA. They increased it $22,800 a year per member for health insurance, and then they cry that health insurance is out of whack. It's inflating 16% a year. We can't afford it. And then what do? They go ahead and make the taxpayer foot the bill.
Right. Well, and again, like I said, you close 10 schools, you can't take those 10 janitors and put them in other schools because they've already got, so there has to come a point where you have to realize that if you do have to downsize, if you do have to close buildings, there's going to be a commensurate loss of staff. Maybe some of them can be absorbed. Maybe you can add a few here and there, but the lion's share of them are going to have to go away. Now, if you're crying about a teacher shortage, across the state, here's a way to help with that, because you could move teachers to schools that have empty classrooms. I mean, if you've got only a 65 or 70% programmatic fill rate, well, you can take teachers out of these other schools and put them in the new ones. I mean, so that you reduce the overall amount of loss, but it's going to have to, somebody's going to lose their job, and nobody wants to say that.
Yeah, you're spot on. And I've told a candidate years ago, I think he was running against me for school board. I said, K-12 education, it's not a jobs program. It's only a jobs program for the graduates of the K-12 system, not for the staff. And that's unfortunate, but people lose their jobs all the time. And not all the time, but many times in private industry. And the government shouldn't be any different. But we shall see. By the way, the Anchorage School District has 400 funded vacant positions, more than 400 funded big. And I did note in the budget documents that I looked at the other day that one of the big decreases in their staff is, guess where? Teachers.
Yeah. No, it's
rest of the staff stays the same.
It's frustrating. All right, we got to go. David Boyle, thank you so much for coming on board and sharing with us. I appreciate it. Keep up the good work, my friend. Thanks for being part of it today.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, folks, we are out of time for today. Tomorrow is Firearms Friday. Going to jump back into it with some good stuff then. Please stick around. We will see you tomorrow. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I know. Legasp. Somebody might lose their job. I mean, that's part of the problem here is that nobody, it's like nobody wants to feel the pain. Well, in the public sector, that's part of the problem. Nobody wants to, live in reality. And Jess keeps going. Jess, she's got a full thing here, which I don't have the time to go into. But Jess, I will just say that I hope you don't think that we're on this program blaming the teachers. This is a systemic problem. This is not a teacher problem per se. There are good teachers, there are bad teachers, I'm sure, but I'm not trying to blame this on teachers. I'm saying this is a systemic problem in the school systems. The fact that you have 2 to 4 administrators for every teacher in the school is leading. I mean, if you want to look for a root cause, to me, that's one of the root causes of what we're dealing with here. And the fact that they don't want to live in reality and say, if we have to close schools, then people have to be laid off. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense whatsoever. So I hope, Jess, you don't think that we're trying to beat down teachers specifically on this. I'm saying that there's a problem, systemic problem in the whole system, and that there's a lot of protectionism going on from the unions and the powers that be and the people who are invested in this, some of them who are teachers, but it's not the individual teachers' problem that are the problem. That's what I'm saying. It's not the individual teachers who are the problem on this. Anyway, my friends, we got to go. I appreciate you. Like and share wherever you are, wherever you're watching. If you like it, you can share it. We'll be back tomorrow with more, bright and early, 6 a.m., The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.